Greenhouse gas inventory, potential future projects that we're looking at. We are working with Avista now for LED streetlight upgrades. Streetlights are always a fun one for us because it's one where I get 50-50 calls. 50% of the calls that I get are, we want all the lights all the time, really bright, everyone's going to die. And then I get the other 50% is we want none of the lights, none of the time, dark skies, or you're going to die. and there's no in between. There's no nuanced opinions about that one. It's one way or the other. And so when Avista started, we've done some pilot installs on these streetlights, and you know the lighting profile, the perceived lumens, the intensity of the light is different with the LEDs. And that's a concern we have. We want to have a livable community. We don't want it to feel. We don't want it to, you know, that it was interesting. Paris, France had a big backlash because they did an LED upgrade there, and the Parisians really felt like it just absolutely destroyed the way the city felt. It didn't feel homey anymore. It felt surgical. It felt like you went to an operating room. And so we've worked with Avista, and you know, it's funny. I do like working for Mosco because a lot of the times with the organizations that we deal with, they'll say to us. And I think they maybe intended it as an insult, but we always take it as a compliment. They're like, we've never dealt with this with any other community. We've just done it everywhere else we've gone. And we're like, yeah, welcome to Moscow. So that's, I love when they say that. And so we work with Avista, and they have a pilot program now. They went based on our feedback. We said, no, this isn't working for us, and did some research. And we've got 2 different lights out now that we're keeping an eye on that have a lower intensity. And they actually have the ability to dial them down and up more, and so it changes the color and the intensity of the light. And so we're trying to hone in on what's a good level for the Moscow residential area. But we're really excited about that because when we get that dialed in and we're able to get that change out done, that'll have a really big impact on our greenhouse gas inventory. And that's something that we think over the next 2 years will really ramp up, and we'll be able to move forward on that.
And what about shielding?
Shielding is still available. We do a lot of shielding. Well, Avista does a lot of shielding by our request. And so we have a lot of residents that will request shielding. They'll say, you know, hey, this is right at a height where it's right through my window. And Avista's actually, they've been very responsive to that. When we've contacted them, generally within a couple days, they're out and they're working on it and working on the shielding.
So it's by request?
It is by request, yeah. If someone comes in and says, hey, you know, I don't like the way this is shining into the house, then we work with Avista and try and minimize the impact on some of these residents. Alternate fuels for the city. We're really excited.
Don't we have shielding that shielded for going up so we keep our
The city has a dark sky ordinance, and so they're required, all of our outdoor lighting is required to be a full cutoff light. What full cutoff means, it means that the light can't go up. It's got to go sideways and down, not up, so that we don't generate too much light pollution. And here, I'll tell you what, you can tell the difference. When you go to a city that doesn't have a dark sky ordinance like that, you can really tell the difference as you drive into town, especially. I was on a little bit of a road trip, and I can't even remember the city we were driving into, but I couldn't believe how far away I could see it because it didn't have much of a dark sky ordinance. Alternative fuels for city fleet. This is one that this is an area that it's been really interesting to see the evolution of this. We implemented our EcoDriver program several years ago, and I'll get a little bit more into the details of that here in a little bit. But there was some pushback from staff. Because there were certain things that we were doing as far as combining use. Actually, it's probably going to be easier if I just talk about it now and then we can go into this. But so our EcoDriver program was something that we instituted in 2012. And there are various principles associated with the EcoDriver program. What we found is that we didn't have a comprehensive program for fleet training. And so just to train people how to use the fleet, what are the expectations? Seatbelt, don't smoke in the vehicles, here's how you fuel them, here's how you report problems with the vehicle, this is what you do in the case of an accident. And so we wanted to formalize that process, but through that process we thought, well, if we're going to go through this formalization, let's insert some driver behavior components, and then also talk about principles that we will use to determine how we specify and what we procure for the City of Moscow fleet. You know, up to that point, it really was just each department would say, we have this, we want to replace it with this, and then we look and see if there was money, and we try and figure it out. And so through this process, we established principles, and some of the principles were that we would buy the most efficient vehicle that met the needs, and so that's always a deciding factor. If there's a vehicle that's an 8-cylinder and there's a vehicle that's a 6-cylinder and it gets better fuel economy and the smaller vehicle does the job, that's the vehicle they get. That's the one that's gonna happen. We also looked at combined uses. You know, by the nature of living north of the 45th parallel, we have seasonally specific equipment that has to be used. And so what we really tried to do was get creative and look for options so that we didn't have two vehicles doing independent jobs and sitting for a season. We said, okay, how do we combine use on the vehicles? And then we also went through what was called a low use review, and this was highly unpopular initially. People have gotten used to it, but every 3 years we do a low use review. So we establish thresholds, and if a certain vehicle doesn't see a certain level of use, then we go to the department and we go through a justification process. We say, is this needed? Can it be combined with another vehicle? Can it be eliminated? Through this process, we eliminated several vehicles from the fleet. We combined use on several vehicles from the fleet. And it was highly successful. And once people started seeing the success, and especially seeing the positive feedback that they got from our elected officials, from the community at large, the departments really became pretty supportive, and they started coming with some great ideas for, hey, you know what, we think we can do this instead of that. I mean, we had the folks out at our water reclamation and reuse facility come, and they said, hey, you know what, we've got this pickup, and we've got a four-wheeler. If we just got a gator with a plow on the front, we can drop the pickup in the four-wheeler and just go with this smaller vehicle, save economy, save on cost. And so it's been really cool to see that happen. And so that was that component, the low-use component. So the next piece that we're now working on, we're close to finishing, is our alternate fuel transition plan. And that's something we've been working on for the last year and a half. That technology is evolving really quickly right now. One of the fun part about Moscow is we're big enough, and because of the nature of the community, there's a very urban expectation of services. There's not a lot of cities the size of Moscow that have the level of expectation for services that Moscow has. But because of the nature of our community, we have to have everything, but we're small enough that generally it's just one of everything. And so that it makes it complicated because we don't have a ton of money either. You know, the state of Idaho has very restrictive rules on municipalities for how we can raise money. You know, there's no option for low cost sales tax, or there's a lot of mechanisms that in other states municipalities have at their discretion that in Idaho we just don't. And so what it means is we have to be really careful. And so it's this fun game in Moscow where we've got a limited amount of resources, but we really have a desire to be on the cutting edge of sustainability, and we want to be leading the way. And so it just makes extra work, especially for these folks, because they end up really having to vet out ideas. We have to be pretty darn sure something's going to work before we dive into it. And so with this alternate fuel transition plan, that's been part of the process. But one of the things I will share about this that's been really encouraging is, you know, the city bought their first full EV 2 years ago. We've got several vehicles that have been identified for replacement by EVs. We've got EV charging stations in the works. With the new police station, that's being taken into consideration. But our police department, and often the police department is kind of the last to be dragged along kicking and screaming with this. You know, there's long been the perception that somehow, you know, the electric vehicles are for the hippies and they can't do what we need them to do. But there is an EV option for police vehicles, and our police vehicles are the biggest users of fuel in our fleet. If you think about it, they're the most vehicles that are out there, they're driving around a lot. And it's been really encouraging. Our police department, when the option became available for a hybrid police vehicle, we thought we were going to have to do some selling. We thought we were going to have to lean on them on that one. We went, and they were immediately like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it, and let's make the transition. So our next police vehicles that we buy through the city of Moscow in this next budget year will be hybrid police vehicles, and we'll be the first ones in the region doing that. And so that'll be pretty cool. I was proud of our boys in blue. That was a pretty neat thing.
Which
Boys
ones
and
did
girls
you
in blue.
choose? Which ones did you choose?
So with Ford, we've gone with the Ford vehicles. We try and save money with the city. There's a lot of little ways we have to try and save money because of those money squeezes. And so when we get a new police vehicle, we transfer a lot of equipment rather than just buying all new equipment every time. And so once we choose a vehicle, it's pretty important that we're able to stay with that vehicle because, you know, you think about things like the cage that goes for the back seat, a lot of the lights, the sirens, the push bars, all of that stuff, we transfer as much as we can to the next vehicle. And so the Ford is actually the first offering the hybrid, and that's the vehicle that we went with when they discontinued Crown Victorias a few years ago. And so, yeah.
I actually want to get back to the LED upgrades. Do you have a timeline? I know it says future, but do you actually have a date where you're going to start, number one? There's a lot of streetlights in Moscow. cost go about? How much is this gonna cost? I'm just curious.
So our streetlights, so Avista will actually conduct a changeout. So there won't be a charge, you know, we have our streetlight fee that residents pay. There won't be an additional charge on top of that, and ultimately, it works out for Avista because the energy savings end up covering the cost of the transition. So they don't have to change the pole, they're able to just change the head to an LED head. We suspect it'll start in earnest pretty quickly here. This summer, we've got enough feedback and data on the lights that we've had out that it's just a matter of us hammering out the specifics with Avista. So I suspect over the next 2 years, we'll see that happen pretty quickly. Idaho has trailed behind. The state of Washington had incentives for Avista to do the change out, and so they've really focused on the Washington side because they have the incentives over there to do a few more things. Like even they got electric chargers. And that's because largely they had incentives over there to do it. And so we don't typically get that kind of stuff out of our state house. And so we lag a little bit behind on those. Okay. So yeah, I talked about this in the EcoDriver. The other thing I'll mention is that we were seeing annually, about a 4% increase in fuel consumption prior to the implementation of the EcoDriver program. So every year we saw about a 4% increase. And that was, largely due to the city was growing. We've added to the fleet. Since then, we've added to the fleet because the city's grown since 2012. We've added employees. We've added numbers of vehicles. But for the first time 3 years ago, we were under 50,000 gallons for the first time in 20 years of consumption, and that was pretty awesome. We were pretty proud of that. And you can see the numbers here. They fluctuate a little bit, largely based on snow seasons that we have. It's amazing how much fuel will get eaten up by plowing snow. It's big, heavy equipment running 24/7, and you can imagine what this February is going to look like when it comes to our fuel consumption. It's not going to be pretty, but we've been in this 45,000 gallon range now for the last 3 years, and we really hope that we can stay in that range in perpetuity. I mean, obviously the city will grow. We're going to have to add units to the fleet, but what we hope is that through our plan, we can not only maintain this level, but see it decrease as we transition to alternate fuel vehicles. But the fun will really be to see when we get all the police vehicles changed over. That'll have a big impact. So that'll be good to see.